Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Viva ENT. This is Johnny the Capo. I'm in the studio with my producer.
It's Eric C.C. Ryder.
Eric C.C. Ryder. My talent coordinator, Mr. Jerry Osborne, is on the line.
I am here.
And we have a legendary record producer, legendary / everything, Mr. Johnny Madara.
Yeah, there's no phase of the business that this guy hasn't been involved in, I don't think.
As a matter of fact, Johnny, we're going to dedicate 2 shows to you. What do you think about that?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. that means when you get old, like I am, that when you get older, see, there's a lot to talk about.
That's right. You know, we've been really fortunate enough to have, we've had Hal Blaine on the show, we've had Mike Stoller on the show, we have Nino Temple on the show, we've had DJ Fontana on the show.
God. Everyone.
And they're all these fellas have got all these great stories because they are, they've been around.
We're not quite there yet chronologically, because I do want to kind of get started and go with things in the order that they occurred. But believe me, Johnny knows Hal Blaine very well, and he'll talk about him when we get to the California saga.
Very
Hal's
good.
He's one of my closest friends. Wonderful man.
Yeah.
Wonderful human being.
And he was an absolutely fabulous guest on our show.
He was great.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that when we talk about California.
Right.
I had a great experience.
I think of this as an audio biography. And by putting it in chronological order, it is pretty much in chapters the high points and maybe some of the low points of your amazing life. So what I'd like to do is skip the really early years and talk about 1957. You have your first solo singles, and those some of those anyway were very successful in regional areas around the country. But everything was really going to break wide open for you when you saw some kids doing some funny dance or something like that, and you thought maybe now'd be a good time for a song about the bop. Take it from there.
Well, actually, I was in my apartment. I was just recently married, and I think I was 18 and a half years old, something like that. I was a teenage married young man. So I'm in my apartment one night, and I hear some guys singing outside. Not outside my apartment, but in a little bit of a distance. But it sounded real good. So the next day, I asked a couple of the neighbors. I heard this group. I said, they're really good. Can you tell me who they are? And they said, that's Danny rapping those guys. I remember the exact words. They said, that's Danny rapping those guys. And I said, what are those guys? Who are these guys? So I found out who they were, and Dave White, one of the members of the group, came down in my apartment, and we talked about music, and finally, after a couple of weeks of us hanging out, I had this idea to do a song called Do the Bop, and had the melody and had some of the lyrics, and Dave and I finished the song, and I was due to have a new record out after Be My Girl, and we recorded it, went and played it for Capitol Records. I was on their subsidiary label, Prep Records, and they didn't like it. They didn't hear it. It was early days of rock and roll, and a lot of the major companies really didn't have that many rock and roll artists. So, but they had me already set to be produced by the guy who was producing Paul Anka. That was Sid Feller.
Mm-hmm.
He was producing Paul Anka, and they wanted me to be produced by him. And really, this was not a part of my beginning of my life, but not knowing that I'd ever be a producer, plus a songwriter. I was just trying to be an artist. So off we went into the studio, recorded it, played it for Capitol. They hated it. Came back and played it for Dick Clark. And Dick Clark said, wow, it's really good, but the bop isn't happening around the country. He says it's starting to slow up. So how about changing to something like At the Hop?
Oh, my God.
So we went back, and I don't know if I sent you the video. I have a video of that.
Yes, you did.
I did, okay.
You did.
And that was it. Then we went back in the studio, took Danny out of the background. He was the original singer of Dave's group, the Juvenaires, and he sang lead. He kind of emulated my performance on Do the Bop, and that was it. It was an instant hit, and Philadelphia, it was a giant hit, and started spreading around the country. And what happened was that Dick Clark's show went network right around the time At the Hop had come out.
Yeah.
So that was big because Dick was able to play that all across the country. And I always think that that's one of the reasons that rock and roll really exploded across the country, because before records were regional, and they would get played in Philly, Cleveland, Detroit, and Baltimore, and finally maybe it would break in a western state. And finally, by the time you got it out to California, the record was out 3 months. But with Dick Clark, it got instant airplay, and I believe that's the reason rock and roll exploded so big.
Well,
because of that show.
Johnny. So you're basically telling our listeners that the original song that you wrote turned into "At the Hop."
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
well,
so
in
now
a moment we'll hear it, Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, you know what? I want to be clear on this. On "Do the Bop," you are the lead singer, not Benny, right?
No, I'm the lead singer on that. That was, like I said, it was be my follow-up to "Be My Girl," but that didn't work out. So, but it worked out to be good because it was my first really number one record.
Well,
and,
I want to tell our listeners in Seattle that "At the Hop" was the number one song of 1958.
Well, it was the first record ever to be number one 7 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I believe that.
The first rock and roll record.
And an interesting story about "At the Hop." That little piano lead in it. It's a very distinctive piano lead.
Walt Gates.
Walter Gates. That's
Walter
right.
Gates.
Well, when Elvis did "A Big Hunk of Love," they pretty much copied that piano lead to the T.
Yeah, well, there's a funny thing. If you ever get a chance to find an LP called Elvis in Germany.
Right.
And on there, he tries to play "At the Hop."
Cool.
And he gets down to a certain part, and he goes, "Damn, I missed that chord." And then he starts singing it, but he didn't know all the words. So it's very clever. It was a real thrill.
Yeah.
Elvis trying to play it and sing it. That was a real thrill. That's on his album Live in Germany. He did it out of his room he was living in, or his house he was living in. He had a little studio in there.
Well, the cool thing is that Elvis was in the Army, so at the Hop exploded, and it was such a smash hit that it almost created a new trend.
Well, it was interesting. I'll share a secret with you that I don't know if I've ever even talked about this, but I may have. But I walked into the studio. I walked in with the Jerry Lee Lewis record, Whole Lot of Shaking going on. And the idea was to capture that kind of a groove.
Right.
So that's where the I always say the germ came from. It started in my brain.
It was that hammering piano part,
that was Walter played. It was great. And we never, even on Rock and Roll's Here to Stay, we never got that same driving. It was very similar, but not that same driving piano that Walt played on At the Hop.
Man,
that's only three musicians. It's an upright bass, piano, and drums. That's it.
Right. Incredible.
Well, I would like to be the first person probably ever in the Seattle area to play the original Do the Bop. And then people can listen and they can make the comparison to the At the Hop that they know so well. So, Eric, let it fly and let's hear it.
Another great Viva ENT show, folks.
In the nation called the bop. Everybody's doing it and they're really moving it, the bop. All the cats and the chicks are getting their kicks doing the bop. Let's all do 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 the bop. You can swing it, you can groove it, you can really start to move it, try to bop. Hey, you can roll it, you can rock it, you can hip it, you can hop it, that's the bop. First to jump a little, hop a little, in the net, she called the bop. Everybody's doing it and they're really moving it, the bop. Oh, the cats and the chicks are getting their kicks doing the bop. You can swing it, you can groove it, you can really start to move it, try the bop. You can roll it, you can rock it, you can hip it, you can hop it, that's the bop. First to jump a little, hop a little, then you start to bop a little bop. Well, let's bop. Let's all do the 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 bop. Ah, let's all do the bop. Do the bop.
Okay, we're back live in Seattle. You're listening to Viva ENT. You just listened to At the Bop, which turned into the number one song of 1958, At the Hop. We have Johnny Madara and Jerry Osborne live on the air here in Seattle. So now, there's got to be some stories, more stories than we originally talked about earlier. Johnny, Jerry, take it away.
Well, the fact that there are so many stories and so many chapters to this man's adventurous life is why we are going to take 2 weeks to spread it out, because we don't want to miss anything. I know, while we were listening to the song, Johnny mentioned that he met Elvis, and we would love to hear about that encounter.
It was a very quick, actually, 10 minutes or so, backstage in Vegas. I was producing Wayne Newton at the time.
Uh-huh.
I did 3 albums with Wayne, and I was in Vegas a lot. And Elvis and Wayne were good friends. And so I got a chance to go to one of the shows in Vegas and hung out with Elvis for about 10, 15 minutes. It was nice. It was a thrill meeting him. You know, it was a thrill. I've met a lot of artists in my career, but meeting Elvis was like really special.
Well, that's
like,
the best.
I felt like I was a little boy.
Good as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, it was Elvis Presley. Oh my God. 1975.
Wow.
74.
Yeah.
A couple of years before he passed away.
Yeah. He was actually in 74, 75, he was still looking good, correct?
Yes. He was still looking pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's move now into 1961. We're skipping a lot of interesting things, but something very significant happened then when a fly landed in the top 10. How did that come about?
Well, again, that was I had a record out, a local record. It was selling a little bit, and I was doing record hops. So I went to a record hop one night. I'm watching these kids do this dance, and their hands are shaking up in the air, and I'm saying, "Wow, that's pretty exciting." So next day I went back to the record shop, and I had I had a record shop for 2 years in West Philadelphia, in the black section of Philly. And all I sold was gospel, jazz, and R&B music. That was it. There were no white records in my record shop. And so I would meet a lot of black guys and great musicians, great writers, great artists. And so when we came back from seeing that hop one night, and I saw The Fly, I called Dave White on the phone. I said, "David, get over here." I said, "We got to write a song." And we did. We wrote The Fly. And there was a band that I had been working with in West Philadelphia, Carl and the Commanders. And we went to the studio with Carl and the Commanders and their lead singer and recorded it. And so we had a finished master, and we went up and played it for Cameo Parkway Records, who were in Philadelphia. And we played it for Bernie Lowe, who was the president. And he loved it. He went out of his mind. He said, "This is great. This will be a hit. But I don't want to use your artist." He said, "I want to use your track, but I don't want to use your artist." He said, "Let's use Chubby Checker." Well, Chubby just had the twist. And I was kind of insistent on using the artist I had. I said, "I really like the record we have." So Bernie Lowe says, "Well, if you release that record, I'll cover it right away with Chubby." So we were kind of forced into giving the track to Chubby. So we put Chubby's voice on, and that record was a huge hit. And that was it. I sold the record shop, and I said, I'm in the record business full time. And then we started having like tons of hit records in Philly. Billy and the Essentials, Maureen Gray, and we had this group, the Pixies 3, that we had quite a few chart records with, and The Secrets, The Boy Next Door. We had a bunch amazing session.
I think that was the first women's lib song.
It was. It really was. And people say, well, what was the idea for writing that song? And I always tell them the truth. The truth was I wanted to write a song about a woman telling a man off. That was the whole reason for writing the song. I said, you always never hear guys complaining about a woman to get out there and tell a guy off for a change. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to say. And we recorded that song as a little demo. Then we got a call from Mercury Records one day, and they wanted Philly kind of music. So they sent us airplane tickets. Off we go on the Mercury Records and walk into a meeting with Quincy Jones, Shelby Singleton, all these big record producers that were producing for Mercury.
Were you in awe of Quincy Jones?
And Quincy was there, and this guy who was the president, Irving Green, Erwin Steinberg, who was the vice president, and we walk in a big long table, and there's a guy from Nashville, big producer, but there's Shelby Singleton, who was a big country producer, of course Quincy, and oh my God, all the other people were there. So we're kids, and we walk in there, and they go, okay, show us what you got. Oh my God. And I loved Quincy Jones, and so we were playing some new songs that we had written, and a couple of masters we had just finished. They liked them, and they said, well, do you have anything brand new you just wrote? So we said, we just wrote this song as ballad, and we played it live, and I sang it for Quincy and the guys. So Quincy fell down. He said, oh, it's a great song. It'd be a great song for Lesley Gore. You know, we just had it at my party. It'd be a great song for her album. So he says to us, call her on the phone. There's the number. I want you to go up and see her. She's at Grossinger's this weekend working. So we drove up to Grossinger's, played it for her with a baritone ukulele by the pool, and she loved the song. She said, I got to hear it with piano. So we went into the main building, and we found a piano and played it for her piano, and she loved it. And then she called Quincy. Quincy says, go meet with the arranger. And Klaus Ogerman met with the arranger, dictated the arrangement to him. And Quincy says, come on up to the session. It's going to be on Wednesday. I want you guys there. So we show up in New York at the session, drove up from Philly, walk into the session, and Quincy's doing the song when we walk in. We were about 20 minutes late, and he's doing the song. So we stay quietly in the back of the studio while he's doing a 65-piece orchestra. And he says, after it's over, he says, well, what do you think? Well, that's Quincy Jones. It's hard to tell Quincy Jones, that there's something wrong with it. I idolized him. So I said to him, I said, Quincy, there's this the piano thing in the beginning that we had, that da-da-dum. Well, that's not on there. And then there's a couple things. There's an extra modulation that should be in there. And Klaus, stop the session. I want John and Dave to come out and make the changes. And he stopped the session for about 30, 40 minutes. And we made a bunch of changes, and that was it. And the record came out great. And it was the last song they were doing for the album. And at the end of the session, they had about 10 or 15 people were in the studio, and he had played all the cuts. And he said, write down your favorite cut, and everybody picked You Don't Know Me. And that was it. And that was just one of my favorite records because it was something I didn't really produce. It was just a song that we wrote. So have it produced by Quincy Jones, if it was never a hit, I was in heaven.
So,
it's too bad it only sold about 3 million.
Yeah.
Well, actually it was in the Dirty Dancing album, and the Dirty Dancing album sold 49 million units.
Oh my!
Because there was records, CDs, and cassettes at the time. So it was all three formats were selling, and that's the day of record sales.
Right.
There are no record sales anymore.
Right.
No.
That song, You Don't Know Me, with Lesley's voice, I don't know if you could have been more luckier to have another artist on that song because she delivered that song like it was nobody's business.
Fabulous, just fabulous, great performance. The version I like of the song, one of the best versions. I love Lesley's version, but Dusty Springfield did a great version of it.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, she did a great version of it, and it's been in 8 motion pictures, and it's been recorded so many times. It's out of all the songs I've written, it's got to be my favorite copyright.
Dusty, you're right about that. Dusty just made that song her own too. You're absolutely correct. I mean, the song was great.
Johnny, I don't know if it was you or one of your co-writers, but my hat is really off to whoever came up with the line, "When I go out with you, don't put me on display." That's a great line.
I know. If I had to think about who came up with that line, I couldn't think of it. I mean, it's 1960.
You don't know me.
Like every teenage girl in America just ate that up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it was just a big hit record in Europe, and in Australia it was number one. New Zealand it went number one, and was by Grace and a rap artist by Jay-Z. It was the name of the artist.
Holy
so
mackerel.
Jay-Z and Grace.
We're down
Great
to
record. And the funny thing was, it was produced by Quincy Jones.
wow. You know,
So,
we're
yeah,
down
years-
to about 2.5 minutes, guys.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
And we're going to have Johnny on the show next week too, right, Jerry?
Yes.
Anything
okay.
I could do to be of help. I love doing these things. It's fun.
Oh, great. Well, real quick, and you guys can cut me off anytime. From the Dovells, Len Barry, their lead singer,
Yeah.
you and he connected with a song that went all the way to number 2 in the nation.
At number 2 in Billboard, number 1 in Cashbox.
Yeah.
But it was that was a song that I had written actually in the car. I had the song almost all done, and I went in for a writing session because we were doing Lenny's album, and the original title I had was 1, 2, and 3.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I said it to Lenny said, no, 1, 2, 3's got to be the title.
I like it.
And that was it. Actually, Lenny and I wrote that song.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That's a great song.
George Harrison asked me a question. I was with him for 2 days, and he kept asking me a couple of times, "How did you get the drum sound on 1, 2, 3?" I said, "What?" I said, "You guys made the greatest records of all, and you're asking me how I got the drum sound on 1, 2, 3?" Yeah, that was John Lennon's favorite record in that time period.
Yeah, it was a great record, and not only that, you know, we just lost George Martin. So,
I know.
So I'm glad you brought up George Harrison and the adulation that they had for that recording, because you know, the Beatles, George Martin, you, Johnny, you know, it just doesn't get any better.
I believe Johnny met George as well as Ringo and Paul in England.
Very cool.
Yeah, I met George Martin at EMI Studios. Him and Paul were in the studio doing Maxwell Silver Hammer, and they were doing the vocal overdub. But Studio 2 at EMI is a double studio. It's at the recording studio is on the second level, and the actual studio itself, where the musicians are, is on the ground level.
Okay,
so
fellas.
You look down into the studio.
We're out of time. We got to go. Thank you very much,
right.
Johnny Madara, Jerry Osborne.
Yeah. We'll call you next week, Johnny.
We'll have you back on the show next week, Johnny. What a pleasure. You're listening to Viva ENT. This is Johnny the Capo, your host, and my producer, Mr.
Sarek CC Ryder saying have a great week.
Thank you so much. Bringing the rock legends to Seattle. Viva ENT. We'll dig you now and see you later, because you are a fine, sweet potato. Thank you so much, folks.
Many toys, you don't own me. Don't say I can't go with other boys.